Hawkeye is quite possibly my favorite Marvel superhero. Now that being said, if you had told me that 3 years ago, I would have literally laughed in your face. See, young comic Mars was dumb and madly in love with a very similar DC character named Green Arrow, and therefore believed that she could never love Hawkeye, let alone remotely tolerate.
Oh, come on!
But here we are. Now, in my eyes, there are two very different versions of Clint Barton. There's Hawkeye. He's a little dull, bland, sometimes a little jokey, but oftentimes forgettable. This is probably the version of Hawkeye you're most familiar with thanks to the recent MCU. Then we have Hawkeye. Typically, if you're reading any comic featuring the character that was written post-2012, it's usually this version. Unlike Hawkeye, Hawkeye is an absolute trash mess, and I say that in the most loving way. Hawkeye is hilarious, bold, and yet lovingly down to earth despite all of his flaws. It's this version of the character that I think everyone should get their hands on at least once, and hence the reason why I've compiled this handy list so you know exactly where to start along with additional fun reads once you fall in love with residential trash man Clint Barton. So this is the guy we're going to be talking about today. Not you. Get out of here. Go home. Go! So let's talk about the real reason why we're here. Hawkeye by Matt Fraction and David Aja. Aja? I'm just going to go ahead and put a disclaimer that if I pronounce your name wrong, I still love your book. I'm just terrible at pronunciation. This is it, where it all began. This is the origin of the Hawkeye. Now, I was told for years to read this book, and I refused because, again, baby comic Mars is a literal dum-dum idiot, and now it's probably in my top 5 favorite comics of all time, and something that I read almost every year. Fraction and Aja did a 22-issue take on the character, which is spread out across 4 separate graphic novels, making it easy for you to pick up and read. There's Volume 1, Hawkeye, My Life as a Weapon, Volume 2, Hawkeye Little Hits, Volume 3, Hawkeye LA Woman, and Volume 4, Hawkeye Rio Bravo. Now, if I'm being honest with you, you could probably skip over 3 entirely, as the story actually revolves around Kate Bishop and is probably the weakest part of the entire run. Which makes me sad, because Kate Bishop is another one of those characters from Marvel that I just desperately love, but there's so many other better Kate Bishop stories that you could be reading that if you missed out on this one, you wouldn't really be missing much. Now, I love the way that Matt Fraction and David Aja take on Clint Barton as a character. He's honestly just perfect each and every way, even when he's not. And yes, while it is considered a cape comic, it doesn't feel as such. Instead here, Hawkeye feels like something from an indie publisher, and the overall story is composed mostly of small vignette slice-of-life stories that even a casual reader could pick up with no prior comic book experience. Also, there's a dog! If that's not enough reason for you to read it, then I don't know what to tell you. Just look at that face. Look at him. There's a lot of things this run brings to the table, including the partnership of Hawkeye Clint Barton and Hawkeye Kate Bishop, who I mentioned before. Despite Clint's advantage in age and experience, it's usually Kate who's deemed the responsible one and generally holds the team together, especially when Clint mucks it up. She's also not afraid to take any of his shit and tell him exactly when his poor life choices have gone too far, which is probably another reason why I really love her. Fraction and Aja's run on Hawkeye also illuminate and represent Clint's disability. Although they tweak its origin, Clint Barton is once again deaf in canon continuity, and in the final stretches of their 22-issue run, we get to watch as the hero adjusts and copes with this new challenge thanks to the help of his brother Barney. His disability is not only represented, but it's embraced and honestly paved the way for how creators would perceive the character going forward. From Christmas with Tony Stark to Russian mobsters, this book is honestly just a joy from start to finish. Aja's simplistic and subtle style, combined with Fraction's wit and humor, is honestly just a match made in heaven. I could literally talk about this book for days and still not have praised it enough, so it looks like you're just gonna have to check it out. Moving right along in old Hawkeye continuity, we've got the all-new Hawkeye series from Jeff Lemire and Raymond Perez. Don't let the name fool you, despite the all-new title, it's still the same old Clint Barton. Jeff Lemire's small little stint on Hawkeye is honestly just great, and Lemire is another one of those writers that I absolutely love and has so many indie titles under his belt. He's got Black Hammer, he's got Plutona, he's got Moon Knight, and he's got Sweet Tooth. You know, I probably should just make a video about how much I love Jeff Lemire one day.
Write that down, write that down!
But knowing that Jeff Lemire has so many wonderful indie titles under his belt, it's awesome to know that he can write top-tier superheroes just as well. While Lemire's run on Hawkeye wasn't nearly as long as Fraction with only a mere 11 issues compiled over 2 trades, I would say it's equally important when it comes to the character. Now, I'm probably going to be butchering a little bit of this, because it's been a while since I've read this particular run, but in the first story arc, we get to see the return of Hawkeye's brother Barney, as well as a little more insight into their childhood together as the story transitions between past and present. The second arc is a lot different and frankly gets a little weird, but weird is good. You've heard of Old Man Logan, now meet Old Man Hawkeye. Unlike the first arc, we spend a lot of focus switching between the present and a near distant future. Now normally, I don't like time jumps, but the creative team honestly nails it with creating a future that is so different from the current timeline, without being something that is too unbelievable. We also get to see old woman Kate, like she's badass and that's all that matters. By the way, this is so much better than the actual Old Man Hawkeye comic, so if you want some Old Man Hawkeye, just read this and not that. But if I'm being quite honest, if you love Fraction's run on Hawkeye, then you're gonna love Lemire's. Despite the two having very different styles when it comes to storytelling, they both tend to focus on the things that make Hawkeye great. There's a solid team up between Kate and Clint, and again, a larger focus and representation on Clint's deafness, something that for me is just always appreciated. Now this one right here is probably one of my personal favorites on this list. It's Tales of Suspense, Hawkeye and Winter Soldier by Matthew Rosenberg and Travel Foreman. Tales of Suspense is a witty buddy cop story with a love triangle romance thrown in for that extra razzle-dazzle. That's enough to grab you, right? The 5-issue miniseries follows Hawkeye and Winter Soldier after the death of Natasha Romanoff, the Black Widow. Despite the two sharing mutual romantic feelings for the same woman, they don't exactly share the same views following her death. Clint Barton, the reckless and hopeful, still holds out that she may be alive, while the stoic Bucky Barnes, man, I love this man, I could look at him all day, would rather leave the past behind him. Despite their contrasting feelings, the two come together when someone starts killing all of Black Widow's enemies. I love Tales in Suspense because it's short and sweet while still leaving a long-lasting impact. As the story itself is only 5 issues, it makes for a light and easy read. Even better about it is that you don't really need that much backstory, unlike a lot of Cape comics. Despite Tales of Suspense rocking a classic title moniker and revolving around 3 major players, any history the reader might need to know is right there on the pages. It also probably helps that thanks to the MCU, these 3 characters are now household names. So thanks for that, Disney. But hey, let's give credit where it's due. Matt Rosenberg is one of my favorite writers out there. By the way, this is my shameless plug for you to read We Can Never Go Home and 4 Kids Walk Into a Bank. And he honestly carries it home with the love for these characters. There are some serious classic moments, like Clint calling Bucky a greasy weasel, and Clint definitely stealing some lo mein straight from somebody's fridge while he interrogates them. Classic trash man. Now, I won't spoil anything, but it also involves one of my favorite moments in comics involving some chocolate milk, so enough said. Up next, we have Hawkeye vs. Deadpool by Gary Dugan and Matteo Lolli. I'm just gonna put it out there. I don't like Deadpool, like at all. Sure, I love the movies, but let's be honest, I was looking at cable half the time. That being said, I really loved Hawkeye vs. Deadpool a lot more than I should. Now, it feels like Deadpool has literally faced everybody. We've got Deadpool vs. Thanos, Deadpool vs. Carnage, Deadpool vs. Punisher, Deadpool vs. Old Man Logan. When does it stop? Like, what's next? However, despite the title of Versus, this is anything but Hawkeye vs. Deadpool. In fact, it's more of a super-powered, super comical team-up between the two. Much like Tales of Suspense, Hawkeye vs. Deadpool feels like another buddy cop story, and Clint Barton just thrives in these sort of stories. It's Halloween in Brooklyn, and our favorite characters are brought together by espionage mystery that pits them against the clock. Another light and fun read, this title is filled with all sorts of humor and quips from the characters. This book is absolutely hilarious and will make you want to laugh out loud, but don't let all the humor fool you. While Hawkeye vs. Deadpool is a comedy at its core, it also manages to sneak in a couple punches here and there, giving some amazing personal development to its characters. Now, I admit, toward the end, some of the action and motives from the villains can get a little convoluted, but you're honestly not reading this book for a life-changing plot. HVD thrives on its characters, its humor, along with the interactions with one another, and that's all done phenomenally well. Also, there's more Kate Bishop, and any book with more Kate Bishop is a good book in my eyes. Last but not least on this Hawkeye train, we've got West Coast Avengers from Kelly Thompson and Stefano Caselli. I'm so upset that West Coast Avengers was canceled. It was so much fun, and yet they canceled it for titles like Major X. Marvel, don't do this, Kelly Thompson did such a phenomenal job rebooting and modernizing this classic team from the 80s, and I just love it a whole heck of a lot. Now, on this version of West Coast Avengers, we have Hawkeye. We also have Hawkeye. We have this super-powered, super queer America Chavez. We've got Fuse. We've got Quentin Quire, also known as Kid Omega. And then, of course, we got Gwenpool. But more importantly, West Coast Avengers has Jeff the Land Shark. Look at him. I love sharks, man. This zany team-up has a fantastic cast of characters and manages to introduce and familiarize you with characters you may not have even heard of. I can definitely tell you I never knew of Kid Omega prior to West Coast Avengers. That being said, there's also an interesting selection of villains, including Marvel's favorite big boy, MODOK. Kelly Thompson tries something new by setting this series up almost like a reality TV show following the West Coast Avengers. That leads to some pretty hilarious moments during our heroes' confessionals with the crew. Also, Clint acts as the team's residential babysitter, which is pretty great. One of my favorite parts about this series is Quentin Quire's little t-shirts and just how meta they are. And then when I went to go and pull clips, I realized that this wasn't a new thing, but it's still fantastic. If you enjoyed series like Young Avengers or even Runaways, you'll really like this one. This is another one of those books where I really enjoyed the character interactions, even if at times the plot was a bit lackluster. Now, I'll admit, for the most part, Clint Barton takes a back seat, letting Kate Bishop take the reins, but there's still some really great moments for the Archer. Also, the way Stefano Caselli draws Hawkeye, he's dreamy. Look guys, I hate that it took me literal years to learn that a girl could love both her green Archer husband and her purple Archer husband. I can't stress enough how much I love Hawkeye and what a wonderful introductory character he can be, especially for a casual reader or even for someone who just doesn't normally enjoy superhero comics. He's my go-to character when I just need a good laugh or something light to read. No joke, I managed to fall in love with Hawkeye in the span of like a year, and I'm always craving new content for my favorite purple Archer. But what are some of your favorite Hawkeye stories? Make sure you let me know down in the comments below, and as always, happy reading! You guys, after years of push and pull, I finally did it and made it to YouTube. Sorry if this video seemed like a bit of a rehash from my Hawkeye reading list over on my blog, but this was just really fun to do and I couldn't help myself for my first video. Of course, I want to thank all of the wonderful people out there encouraging me to make the switch to YouTube, and I can't wait to make more fun videos for you guys in the future. Of course, if you want more content, you can always follow me on Twitter and Instagram, both of which I'll put links in the description below. And if you like the kind of content I produce, you can always consider contributing to my Ko-fi, which is also down below.